In the forgotten folds of the Carpathian Mountains, where mist clings like memory and the earth never fully dries, there is a silence older than sound. A hush that falls not from peace, but from centuries of listening. Listening for footsteps that never came home, for names whispered to the wind, then never spoken again. In this place, time breathes differently. The forest does not age, it remembers. Long before the name Dracula darkened parchment or passed through trembling lips, another word stirred fear among the living, Strigoi. It was never shouted, only murmured, soft as a shiver. For those who dared name the creature risked waking it. The Strigoi, it was said, were not born of the night. They returned to it. Men who died badly, souls twisted with unfinished rage, envy, or despair. They were not monsters from another realm, but reflections of our own darkness. They were us. The story begins not in a castle, but in a village on the edge of forgetting. Imagine it, a cluster of wooden homes nestled into the ribs of a cold valley. Smoke curling from chimneys, curling not up, but sideways, pulled by winds that whisper in tongues no man speaks anymore. Chickens scatter as you pass. The old crone on the steps stops spinning her wool, her blind eyes tracking something over your shoulder. Children are not allowed to play in the woods, not because of wolves, but because the woods are hungry. Here, each home bears a talisman above the door, garlic plated with red thread, iron nails hammered into the lintel, poppy seeds scattered in the threshold. Not from superstition, no, from memory. These are not tales told to frighten children. They are rules passed down like inheritance. Break them, and you may invite back someone you buried. They do not speak of the first Strigoi. They say there was no beginning, only a curse that curled its way into men's blood the moment death ceased to be final. The villagers have long known the signs. A corpse that refuses to decay, a cat leaping over a fresh grave, a dream so vivid it leaves scratches on your skin, milk curdling without cause, children who sleep and do not wake. They say the Strigoi rise first in spirit, wandering in dreams, draining vitality, feeding not on blood but on breath, on will, on warmth. Then, if angered or hungry enough, they return in flesh. Pale, hollow-eyed, moving like marionettes pulled by old grief. Not all believe. Some call it folklore, the fancy of old women and candlelit fears. But those who mock do not stay long. In this valley lives our protagonist, a young healer named Elena. She does not believe in Strigoi. Not yet. Elena is practical. Her hands are calloused from years grinding herbs, stitching wounds, and coaxing life from the edge of death. Her mother was the village midwife, her grandmother too. They taught her the secrets of roots and flowers, of poultices and prayers. But there was one thing they never taught, never even whispered: how to keep the dead from coming back. And now, her mother is dead. Not from plague, not from injury. She died sitting upright, eyes wide open, as though she saw something she could not explain. Something that pulled her across the veil without touching her skin. 3 days later, Elena hears her voice. The house groans at night. Not from age, it is not old, but from the weight of something unseen. A cold settles over the floorboards, deep and hungry. Doors open that no wind touched. The fire dies without warning. At first, Elena tells herself it is grief, hallucination, exhaustion, until she finds the scratch. Just one, across her collarbone, as thin as a strand of hair, but fresh, sharp, as though left by a nail. Her mother's nail. Still, she says nothing. Not to the priest, not to the elders, not even to Ion, the blacksmith's son who watches her with quiet eyes and follows her into the woods, carrying baskets and silence. She is not afraid. Not yet. But the animals are. The chickens stop laying. The dog refuses to enter the house. The mirror by her mother's bed cracks down the center, as though split by an unseen blade. And in the village, a child dies. Then another, and another. The old women gather, wrapped in wool shawls, smelling of smoke and pine resin. They speak in riddles around the fire. They do not accuse. They do not cry. They simply nod to one another, as if remembering an old recipe for horror. They say, the veil is thin this season. They say, some spirits are too heavy to pass. They say, the dead want something. Elena listens, her fists clenched in her lap. She will not believe. She cannot. Because if she does, it means her mother's soul is not at peace. It means something came back. something that has her voice, her hands, her hunger. The priest offers prayers. The blacksmith offers iron. The old women offer salt and secrets. But none of it stops the dreams. Elena sees her mother each night, standing at the edge of the forest, eyes sunken, mouth open but silent, beckoning, begging, blaming. She wakes with dirt under her nails. And one night, her window is open. Thus begins our tale, not of Dracula, the prince of legend, but of the shadows he emerged from, of the Strigoi, who wore no capes and cast no charm, who were born not of myth, but of memory, of grief that curdled, of love that refused to let go, of death denied its final silence. This is not just a story of monsters. It is a story of mothers and daughters, of healing and hunger, of what happens when we bury the wrong thing, and of a girl who learns the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, to save the living, you must confront the dead. Before the whispers, before the scratching, before the milk soured in the bowl and the sun hung pale and too long in the sky, there was Elena. She was not a girl meant for fear. She had grown strong under her mother's hand, kneading dough before her arms were long enough to reach the edge of the table, carrying water in iron pots without complaint. Her fingers smelled always of lavender, nettle, and smoke. She knew which leaf soothed fever, which bark drew out poison, which root was bitter enough to make the dying forget their pain. They said she had her grandmother's hands, the hands of a healer, steady, firm, capable of both mercy and command. But where her grandmother had been devout, and her mother wise in old ways, Elena was something else, curious. She questioned what others accepted. Why did spirits only trouble the poor? Why did the church's prayers often fall flat, while a bundle of dried rosemary under the pillow could drive a nightmare away? She believed in nature, in balance, in things that could be held in the palm, and she believed most of all that the dead stayed dead. That was, before her mother's death rewrote the laws she trusted like scripture. Her mother's death was too clean, too still. There had been no fever, no fall, no warning. She had been sitting by the hearth, spinning wool. A curl of smoke twisted through the chimney. A sigh escaped her lips, and then nothing. Her body did not fall. It remained upright, head tilted, eyes open, not blank but focused, as though she were still seeing something. Elena touched her, and the chill was already there. But what chilled her more was the expression, not pain, not peace, recognition. The village did not ask many questions. They came to pay their respects, quietly, leaving dried flowers and candles on the doorstep, whispering condolences with their eyes cast downward. One woman murmured, "A clean death is a gift." Elena wanted to scream. Clean? No death that sudden is clean. No death that feels like an answer to a question unasked. She buried her mother near the edge of the forest, where the trees grew thinner and the wild herbs grew thick, not close to the churchyard. Her mother had always said she did not trust consecrated earth. The church blesses what it does not understand. Elena placed rosemary at her head, poppy seeds in the grave. She whispered the old incantation, not because she believed, but because her mother had taught her the words like lullabies. And then she returned home, alone. The days grew long and gray. Elena resumed her healing work. People still came, women heavy with child, old men with rattling lungs, children fevered from poor wells. She worked with her hands, but her mind wandered. She began to hear things at dusk, not voices, but absence. The way the birds stopped singing just before the night rose. The way the dog whimpered without cause. And once, she returned from the river to find her back door open, though she'd barred it from the inside. Nothing was taken, but the rosemary bundle above the door was missing. She found it on her mother's grave the next morning. Ion, the blacksmith's son, had always been quiet. A large man with rough hands, awkward around words, but gentle around animals. Elena knew him since they were children, though they had never been close. But since her mother's death, he had begun appearing at odd moments, leaving wood by her door, offering to help lift buckets, silently fixing the latch on her gate. One evening, as she carried herbs from the forest, she found him waiting near her path. "You shouldn't go there alone," he said. His voice cracked a little, not from emotion, but from the strain of saying too much at once. "I know what I'm doing," she replied, not unkindly. He nodded, looked at her hands. Then, after a moment, "People say she didn't close her eyes." Elena's heart stilled. "They say that means something." She clenched her jaw. They always say something. When they're afraid. Ion looked away. They also say the dreams will start soon. She didn't ask how he knew. The first dream came a week later. Elena stood by her mother's grave. The sun was gone, though the sky glowed an unnatural orange. Her mother stood across from her. Whole, not decayed, not monstrous. But not right. Her eyes were too deep. Her nails too long. Her mouth moved without sound. And then, Elena woke. There was soil beneath her nails, and a trail of poppy seeds scattered across the floor. She burned sage and slept with iron shears beneath her pillow. The next night, the dream returned. In desperation, Elena turned to Toma, the village elder who remembered things even the priests had forgotten. He lived beyond the far well, among hanging herbs and books with cracked leather spines. He let her in without a word. "I need to know," she said, "about the Strigoi." He did not flinch. He opened a book with trembling hands, pointing to a page worn soft from years of turning. "The Strigoi are not demons," he said. "They are debts unpaid, promises broken. They rise because something still binds them to the earth." Elena stared at the drawing, skeletal, clawed, but with the face of a woman. "What do they want?" she asked. "Depends," Thomas said. "Some want revenge. Some want return. But the worst," he looked up, eyes fogged with age, "the worst don't know they're dead." Elena found the letter tucked beneath the floorboards of her mother's bed. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Slanted, sharp, full of breathless urgency. "If I die suddenly, do not bury me in the earth. Burn the body. Seal the ashes. Do not weep. And above all, do not follow if I call your name in the dark." It was unsigned, unfinished. She held the paper in shaking hands. Not from fear, but from rage. Why hadn't her mother told her? What had she known? Elena stood before her mother's grave again, this time in daylight. She poured salt in a circle around the plot, lit a candle, whispered the ancient words. "I don't know what you saw before you died," she murmured, "but I will find out. I will not let you become something you feared." The wind stirred. The candle flickered, and far off, at the edge of the woods, something laughed. Soft, hollow, familiar. The journey had begun. That night, Elena prepared. She packed herbs, talismans, a silver needle. She braided her hair back the way her grandmother once taught her. Tight, protective. She left a note for Ion. "If I do not return by dawn, dig up the grave. Burn what you find." And then she walked into the forest. Not to flee, but to find answers. She would learn that not all Strigoi are created from malice. Some are created from grief too great to bear. From love that twists itself into need. From secrets buried in blood. And she would learn her mother had been hiding far more than just herbs beneath the floorboards. She was not just fighting her past. She was becoming part of it. The forest was not what it seemed in daylight. Beneath its green canopy, light became illusion. It filtered through the branches in shards and veils, like stained glass above a cathedral of thorns. The path, once familiar, twisted on itself. Roots pulsed like veins. Trees leaned just a little too close, as if listening. The deeper Elena went, the more the woods seemed to breathe. Each step forward was an act of defiance, against death, against silence, against fear. She was not a warrior. She was not trained for battles of blood or blade. But Elena had something else, a question that refused to die. And in these woods, questions were more dangerous than swords. An hour into the forest, Elena came upon the old boundary stone. It jutted from the soil like a broken tooth, cracked in half by lightning long ago. Her grandmother had once told her, never cross the stone without permission from the forest. As a child, she'd laughed. But now she did not laugh. She placed a sprig of sage on the stone, lit a match, let the smoke drift. Then she whispered, "I seek truth, not trespass." The wind hissed low. The smoke bent backward, curling into a spiral. Permission, it seemed, was granted. She crossed. Deeper still, the sounds of the world changed. Birds grew silent. Insects vanished. Even the wind walked on tiptoe. Elena moved slowly, her fingers brushing the herbs at her belt like a rosary. Mugwort, wormwood, ironwort, yew. And yet, something watched. Not with eyes, with memory. She felt it behind her, above her, not threatening, curious, as if the forest itself remembered her family line. She heard a voice, not aloud, but within. "You are your mother's daughter." She turned. Nothing. Only the shadow of a tree nodded like a woman in mourning. Near dusk, the trees parted, and there it stood. A hut, cradled in moss and root, leaning like a drunk on one leg. No windows, no chimney, no door, yet smoke curled from the roof. And from within came a faint rustling, like bones being sorted. Elena stepped forward, heart clenching. She remembered the old tales. Some said Baba Yaga lived in a hut with chicken legs. Others said the Moroi, the unquiet spirits of the dead, built such homes in the woods, doorless so no one could ever enter or leave. She stepped closer, whispered, "Mother?" The hut groaned, and a slit opened in the wall. Not a door, a mouth. Elena did not run. Instead, she stepped inside. The darkness swallowed her instantly. Not the darkness of night, but of earth, of root, of secrets never meant to see sun. The interior was far larger than it appeared. A single candle flickered in the center of the room, revealing nothing but the floor, a circle of bone. Every type, bird, fox, deer, human. She stepped into the circle. The candle flared, and then her mother appeared. Not as a ghost, as a memory, sitting at the hearth, spinning wool. She turned her head, smiled, spoke. "Elena, you're late." It wasn't real. It couldn't be. And yet, her mother's face held warmth. Her voice, the soft cadence of bedtime songs and soup making. It reached into a wound Elena hadn't known was still bleeding. "I came to find you," Elena whispered. Her mother stood. "You didn't need to. I was always here." Elena's knees weakened. This wasn't a monster. It was comfort, but something was wrong. Too perfect, too still. Her mother blinked, but her eyes didn't change. Her breath came, but her chest did not move. Then, her mother spoke again. "Stay, Elena. Stay with me. Forever. There's no pain here." And suddenly, the bones beneath Elena's feet shifted. The candle dimmed. The hut creaked. The walls began to close in. And the face of her mother melted, not into rot, but into blankness. Skin without soul. A mask of memory. This was not her mother. It was the part of grief that begged her to forget, to sleep, to stop asking questions. A trial of temptation. Elena reached into her pouch, pulled out a sprig of yew, crushed it, spoke the words her grandmother had taught. "Memory is not truth. Love is not return. The dead do not speak with my mother's voice." The hut screamed. The image shattered, and Elena was thrown into the dark. She awoke underground, or so it seemed. Dirt above, dirt below, no light. She moved blindly, her fingers clawing through the soil. And then, a hand grabbed hers. Cold, strong. It pulled, not violently, not painfully, but with purpose. She did not resist. And suddenly, she was above ground again, gasping, coughing, kneeling at the base of a massive tree shaped like a woman. Roots curled like fingers. The bark split down the middle, revealing a hollow filled with flowers, none of which should bloom in this season. A guardian tree, the symbol of passage. Elena had passed her first trial, but the forest was not done. That night, she lit a small fire beneath the tree. Wrapped in her cloak, she tried to sleep. But just before her eyes closed, she heard it. A voice, dry as wind over bone. "You seek the dead, but do you know what they want?" Elena sat up. "I seek the truth." The voice laughed. "Truth is only hunger with a name." Then silence. But from that point on, the dreams began to change. In the dreams, she no longer saw just her mother. She saw others. A man with hollow cheeks and wolf-bitten limbs. A child holding their own severed shadow. A woman whose face shifted each time Elena looked. Sometimes her own, sometimes her mother's, sometimes a stranger. They stood in a circle, watching, waiting. Behind them, a great stone throne, carved with faces that screamed. And from beneath the throne, something stirred. A Strigoi queen. Not a single creature, but a force. The embodiment of everything denied. Death, love, revenge, justice, hunger. She whispered Elena's name. And Elena answered. When she awoke, it was still dark. But the forest was different. Quieter. Closer. Elena's hands smelled not of herbs, but of blood. And in her palm was a single black feather. Where it had come from, she did not know. But she kept it. Because now, she understood. She was not hunting the Strigoi. She was being summoned by them. The forest had changed. Not just in shape, but in intent. It no longer simply watched Elena. It began to guide her. The roots parted as she stepped. The branches seemed to whisper behind her back. The air thickened, fragrant with strange sweetness, like honey spilled on old stones. The deeper she walked, the more the world resembled a forgotten dream, one she may have lived centuries ago. She was no longer walking through a forest. She was walking through memory. But whose? By the third night, she reached the river. It did not rush. It did not babble. It moved with silence, slow and wide, reflecting not the stars, but faces. Dozens of them. Some old, some young, all watching from beneath the surface. Their eyes were open, lips pressed together in solemn silence. As she stepped closer, the current spoke, not with sound, but with names whispered in her mind. Names she had never heard, but somehow knew. Marta, Ionel, Serena, Yoan. Names of the forgotten. Names of the lost. Names that had never been laid to rest. They were Strigoi. Not evil, not monstrous, just unfinished. A stone bridge arched across the river, half crumbled, covered in moss. At its center stood a woman. She wore a black veil over her face and robes made of torn burial shrouds. Around her neck, keys, bones, and teeth strung together like pearls. She said nothing. Elena bowed her head. "I seek passage." The woman lifted her veil. Her face was eyeless, two hollow sockets, weeping sap. "You carry the scent of your mother," she rasped. "But not her burden." "What burden?" The woman raised a skeletal hand, touched Elena's chest. "You'll know, when it starts to burn." Then, without stepping aside, she vanished into shadow. Elena crossed the bridge alone. On the other side, she found something impossible, a marketplace, built among trees that glowed from within. Lanterns hung from branches like cocooned fireflies. Stalls made from bones and bark offered strange wares. Jars of captured laughter, bundles of raven feathers, vials of ink made from midnight tears. But there were no merchants, only shadows. And yet, she felt watched. She approached a stall holding broken mirrors. In one, she saw her reflection, but older, wiser, wounded, with eyes that had seen too much and yet burned with clarity. In another, she saw her mother, not dead, not decayed, but bound in chains made of her own hair. A voice echoed, "What would you trade to understand her pain?" Elena stepped back. "Nothing, not even peace. I didn't come for peace. I came for the truth." Then bleed for it. She felt a sting on her hand. A thorn, though none were near, pierced her palm. A single drop of blood fell onto the mirror, and the image shifted. Now she saw a child, a girl no older than 6, crying in the woods. Alone, forgotten, her mother, before she had become anything else. Elena understood. Then, her mother's story began in pain. And pain changes people into monsters if left unspoken. Night deepened, and with it came the hollow man. He did not walk. He hovered. His feet never touched the earth. His face was featureless, a smooth plane of skin, as though God had forgotten to sculpt expression. But in his chest, there was a gaping hole, and within it burned a small, flickering fire. He circled Elena slowly. "You seek her," he said in a voice like grinding metal. "I seek the truth. The truth will gut you," he warned, "just as it did her." "What happened to her?" "She was called, just like you." She answered, "Just like you." But unlike you, she refused to carry it. "Carry what?" He floated closer, and from the fire in his chest, a spark leapt, landing on Elena's skin. It didn't burn. It pulsed, with recognition. "She passed the burden to you," he said, "and it is waking." Suddenly, the trees shrieked, a sound like thousands of ravens lifting into the air, and the hollow man vanished. Elena collapsed against a fallen tree, panting. The spark from the hollow man still glowed faintly on her skin, just above her heart. A mark. It formed slowly, a spiral of vines, enclosing a drop of blood. It pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and with each pulse, memories not her own began to rise. A man's scream in the dark, a fire consuming a cottage, a child buried too soon, a woman standing at the edge of a grave she dug herself. Her mother's memories. But they weren't fading. They were binding. Elena's journey was no longer just a search. She was becoming the vessel. In the final hours before dawn, Elena was approached by 3 figures. They emerged from the trees in silence, cloaked in robes of ash and smoke. Each carried an object, The first, a mirror cracked down the center. The second, a scale that tilted endlessly. The third, a lantern that held no flame. They encircled her, spoke as one. Daughter of blood, keeper of flame, you seek the Strigoi, but they have already found you. Do you accept the burden left behind? Elena did not answer. Do you vow to face what she could not? Elena closed her eyes. Her mark burned. Do you choose to awaken what sleeps beneath the grave? And then she spoke. I choose to remember. The three figures bowed, then vanished into dust. The ground beneath her trembled and opened. A pit, a perfect circle, ringed with roots and carved symbols. It breathed cold. At its bottom, darkness thicker than night. And from within, she heard a voice. Her mother's. Elena, come. Not a scream, not a demand, a plea. Elena gripped the black feather she'd kept since the first dream. She stepped forward and jumped. She fell not through earth, but through memory. Visions flashed like lightning. Her mother, bloodied, kneeling beside a crib. A priest turning away in silence. Villagers pointing, whispering. A child's grave, a curse unspoken. And then, at the bottom, a room made of bones. The same throne she had seen in her dreams. The Strigoi queen sat upon it now. Her eyes were like burned coals. Her skin cracked with age and anger. But her face, part of it, was Elena's mother's. She opened her mouth, and 1,000 voices spoke. We do not rise for hunger. We do not rise for hate. We rise for justice denied. We rise because no one remembered. We rise because we were never allowed to rest. Elena fell to her knees. Tears ran silently down her cheeks, not from fear, but from knowing. These were not just monsters. They were the echoes of silenced lives, of wronged women, of grief made flesh, of pain buried too long. The Strigoi queen lifted a bony finger, pointed at Elena. You carry her sins. Will you carry her truth? And Elena answered, yes. The silence that followed her vow was not empty. It was sacred, as though even the trees and shadows dared not breathe. Elena knelt before the throne of the Strigoi queen, her heartbeat echoing like war drums through her ribs. Her vow echoed back to her, yes, but she didn't yet know what it meant. Only that something ancient had awakened the moment she said it. The queen leaned forward, her voice no longer 1,000 echoes, but a single, weary truth. Then you must face them. Who? The queen extended a skeletal hand toward the darkness behind the throne. Those who were left behind. The ones who still weep beneath the roots. The ones your mother could not forgive. You must walk the path of the buried, and return only if your soul remains whole. The bones beneath Elena's knees stirred. A passage revealed itself behind the throne, a tunnel lit by lanterns without flames, glowing instead with memory. The test of the dead had begun. The tunnel curved into a chamber lined with mirrors, each one fractured, discolored, weeping fog. From the mist, a man emerged. He was tall, gaunt, with eyes like broken glass and lips stained red, not from blood, but from the truth he had swallowed too late. Elena recognized him, not by name, but by feeling. Her mother had spoken of him in fragments. A lover once, a promise, broken. You know me, the man said, voice hollow. I know what you did. He nodded. I left her when she needed me. I feared what they said, that she was cursed, touched by something unclean. I turned my back. The mirrors behind him cracked further. She died alone because of you. She died angry, he whispered. And that anger made me linger. He stepped forward, eyes pleading. I am sorry. Let me pass. Free me. Elena's pulse raced. Was that her role? To absolve? To grant mercy to those who never earned it? She looked into the mirror and saw herself, abandoning Ion, turning from the village, holding her mother's letter but never reading the rest. She wasn't without guilt either. She placed her hand on the man's heart. I do not forgive you, but I release you. His face softened, and then crumbled into ash. The mirror cleared, and Elena walked on. The next chamber was smaller, a child's room, though faded and damp. In the corner sat a girl, maybe 12 years old, her feet bare, her dress too short, her eyes dull. She was plaiting the hair of a doll without a head. Elena felt ice creep through her bones. The girl looked up. You didn't see me, she said flatly. Elena knelt. I do now. She saw me once. The girl murmured. Your mother. She came to the well. I tried to speak. But no one listens when you're small. when your voice doesn't match your wounds. A bruise bloomed across her cheek as she spoke. I died before I had the words. But I remember them now. I remember everything. Elena's throat tightened. The girl pointed to her doll. Put it back together. Elena hesitated, until she saw that the doll's head was her own. A mirror again. She took the head, reattached it, gently, with thread and care. The girl's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted someone to see me. I see you, Elena whispered. The child smiled, and vanished in a blink of feathers. The chamber went dark. The test continued. This room held no figure, no corpse, only a cloak draped over a chair, and a heartbeat that pulsed in the air. A voice rose from nowhere. I am the fear that outlives the body. I am the shadow that never needed flesh. I am what she tried to bury, but could not. Elena felt it coil around her. Not a ghost, a curse, a will so strong, it refused death. Not for love, not for justice, for control. It wanted to live through her now. Give me your skin, it whispered. Let me walk again. I can fix what she broke. I can finish what she began. It slithered into her ear, her thoughts. You're not strong enough to carry her past. I am. But Elena had seen enough. She pressed her palm to her burning chest mark. Spoke aloud. You are not her. You are what she feared. And I do not carry fear. I carry memory. The room shrieked. The cloak caught flame, and the shadow burned with it. Elena stumbled into the last room. It was simple. A cottage. Her mother's cottage. The fire crackled. Herbs hung from the ceiling. Everything as it was. And there, standing by the hearth, her mother. Real. Alive. Or so it seemed. Elena, she said softly. Come home. Elena took a step forward, then stopped. No, this isn't real. Her mother smiled. Of course it is. You've suffered enough. The journey is over. Just rest. No more trials. No more graves. Elena felt her knees weaken. It was everything she wanted. To hold her. To weep. To lay her head on her mother's lap and forget the forest, the pain, the Strigoi. But the mark on her chest seared. And then she saw it. Her mother's feet didn't touch the ground, and her shadow moved in the opposite direction. Elena looked her in the eyes. I love you, she said, but I will not follow you into the lie. Her mother's smile broke, and behind it was the Strigoi queen, wearing the mask of memory. You pass, the queen whispered. You remember, and remembrance is power. Elena awoke outside the pit, lying beneath the roots of the woman-shaped tree. The mark on her chest had bloomed, no longer a spiral, but a flower of blood and ash. The forest was quiet again. The test was over. But now, the real war would begin. Because to carry the truth was one thing. To speak it aloud, in a world that had silenced it for centuries, that was the true rebellion. And the Strigoi were waiting. Elena stood before the Strigoi queen once more. But now, she did not kneel. The mark over her heart had unfurled into a full sigil, pulsing like a second heartbeat. The pain had settled into clarity. She no longer followed her mother's path. She carried it, but walked her own. Around her, the chamber of bone and silence now shimmered with thousands of figures, stray spirits, half-formed memories, women with hollow eyes, men with missing names, children bound in shadow. All Strigoi, all watching. The queen descended from her throne, her robes no longer tattered, but flowing, stitched from moth wings and ancient parchment. You came through fire, she said, voice like a blade across stone, and did not become ash. Now we speak as equals. Elena said nothing. Her silence was strength. The queen circled her. You were her guilt well, but that is not why I called you. Then why? Elena asked. The queen stopped. Because the old order must die. The queen raised a hand, and before Elena appeared a vision. Her village, still sleeping, still sighing through its routine of candlelight and denial. She saw Ion hammering at his forge, children running through fields where bones lay beneath the soil, priests blessing wells that fed rot. They have forgotten, the queen whispered. They buried us in silence, called us demons, wrote us out of their songs. And so we rise, not for blood, but for remembrance. Elena turned away. They are afraid. They are blind. They are human. And we were not. The queen snapped. We are their mothers, their sisters, their first fears, their buried sins. Do not mistake silence for innocence. A pause. Then the queen's voice softened. You have walked through shadow. You have tasted the burden. You have seen what lies beneath the grave. So I offer you a choice, child of both worlds." She extended a hand. "Be my emissary. Bridge the dead and the living. Bring truth where lies were planted. Let the world see the Strigoi not as monsters, but as memory given teeth." The queen's offer pulsed in Elena's chest like a hidden drum. She could see it clearly, returning to the village, not as a healer, but as a voice of reckoning, tearing down old lies, forcing the priest to speak the names of the damned, making the guilty remember what they tried to bury. There would be power in it. Righteousness. Revenge, too. And yet, she thought of Ion. His gentleness. His quiet offerings. The weight of grief behind his silence. She thought of the girl by the well, never heard. The woman betrayed. The child forgotten. They needed healing, not wrath. Truth, yes, but not scorched earth. "No," she said. The queen blinked. "No, I will not carry your vengeance. I will not be another mask for grief to wear. I will tell your story, but not with fire." The queen's eyes narrowed. "You deny me? I see you," Elena whispered. "That is not denial." The queen did not lash out. She smiled, and the smile was far more dangerous. "Then you must prove it. Go back. Speak our name. And when they call you mad, when they burn your herbs and bar their doors, will you still choose the soft road?" Elena nodded. The queen raised a finger, touched Elena's forehead. A searing pain burned behind her eyes. "A final gift, or a curse. You carry us now," the queen said. "All of us, not just your mother. If you falter, we will rise again. And next time, we will not ask." The chamber crumbled. Light burst from above, a shaft of dawn slicing through shadow. The spirits faded, not in torment, but in peace, as if seeing themselves, truly, for the first time. Elena climbed, out of the pit, out of the wound, back into the world. When she emerged from the forest, days had passed. The village was as she left it, but she was not. Children stopped to stare at her. Dogs barked, then whimpered. The priest's bell rang too early, as if warning of something unseen. Ion was the only one who stepped forward. "You came back," he said, though it was not a question. "I had to." He looked at her, eyes drifting to the mark on her chest, now dim, but eternal. "They're afraid," he said quietly. "They should be," she answered. "But not of me, of what they've forgotten." That night, Elena gathered the village. Some came to mock, some to listen, some because they feared not showing up. She stood by the old well, where the girl had once whispered and been ignored, and she told them everything. About the Strigoi, about memory, about her mother, about the bargain she refused, and the truth she chose. When she finished, no one spoke. The priest stepped forward first, and spat at her feet. "Which," he said, but an old woman beside him whispered, "No, she is a witness." And slowly, another voice joined, then another, until the silence cracked, and became something else. That night, Elena slept beside her hearth, not in fear, in peace. And in her dream, her mother came once more. Not shrouded, not twisted, just a woman, tired, but free. She kissed Elena's brow. "You did what I couldn't." "No," Elena whispered. "I did what came after." The next morning, Elena found a black feather by her door, and a single sprig of yew. She placed both on the altar she built, neither Christian nor pagan, just human, a place where truth could rest, and the Strigoi could finally sleep. In the days that followed Elena's return, the valley trembled under the weight of revelation. Whispers of the Strigoi, once hushed and fearful, now coursed through every hearth and doorway. Some villagers feared they had welcomed a monster. Others believed they could not unhear the truth she had spoken. Yet beneath the murmurs, a shifting tide began, a collective reckoning, a questioning of old taboos. But for Elena, the real trial approached as the harvest moon rose blood-red over the Carpathian peaks. It was said that on that night, when the veil thins at its thinnest, the Strigoi queen herself would return to demand justice, or vengeance, for the bargain Elena had struck. The ultimate trial would test not only her courage, but the very soul of the village she sought to heal. Elena stood at the edge of the clearing where she had first encountered the hut without a door. The night air smelled of damp earth and rotten leaves. Torchlight flickered from windows behind her, but none dared follow her into the clearing. Even Ion paused at the tree line, his silhouette tense with worry. Above them, the harvest moon hung low and swollen, tinged with copper light. The red glow painted the forest in shades of fire and blood, an omen of challenge and choice. Elena's heart pounded as she stepped forward, clutching the amulet fashioned from her mother's silver needle, polished bright and carved with runes of binding and protection. Ion called after her, voice cracking. "Elena, wait. If this goes wrong." She turned, pressing a finger to her lips. "It won't." His eyes brimmed with unshed tears. He nodded, clenched his fists, and retreated into the darkness, leaving her alone before the towering pines. At the clearing's center, a great ring had been carved into the earth, its circumference marked by jagged stones and stakes of ash wood. Within, symbols etched in bone dust formed an intricate spiral, an invitation and a trap. Elena set her lantern at the spiral's mouth and stepped inside. The forest held its breath. From the silence arose a sound, first a whisper, then a chorus. The wind carried countless voices, mourning songs, laughter stilled too soon, secrets choked by fear. These were the voices of the Strigoi she had set free, now asking to be heard at last. Elena laid the amulet upon the spiral's center and drew a circle around it with her finger, reciting the words given by the Strigoi queen: "By bone and root, by blood and seed, I bind the broken, I give them heed. On this night of moon turned red, we meet at last, our debts are weighed." The words faded into the trembling air. The lantern's flame guttered. A wind rose in the clearing, swirling leaves into a twister of shadow. The spiral of bone dust glowed faintly. Then, from between two ancient oaks, she emerged. The Strigoi queen descended as though walking upon mist. Her crown of moth wings wavered. Her cloak of parchment robes whispered forgotten names. Her eyes, burned coal-black, fixed upon Elena with both curiosity and sorrow. "Child who dared," she intoned, voice resonating like distant thunder. "You have called us here. You stand at the reckoning." Elena bowed. "I stand to honor both the living and the dead." The queen swept a hand through the air. The voices crescendoed into a single word, echoing through the clearing: "Justice." The ground trembled, the circle's bones rattled. For statues materialized at the cardinal directions: a priest, a blacksmith, an old woman, and a child, each carved in living flesh, the very villagers Elena knew. They represented the pillars of her community: faith, craft, wisdom, and innocence. The Strigoi queen spoke. "Each bears a debt to the dead. Each must confess, here, now, before all these spirits." The priest knelt first, Father Petru, the man who had refused a grave for a stillborn babe. He opened his mouth, voice trembling. "I feared the wrath of the church if I consecrated it. Forgive me." He placed his crucifix upon the bone circle. A silent sigh dispersed his form. Next came the blacksmith, Ion's father, who had broken promises to a dying friend rather than risk his forge's strength. He confessed in a voice of iron and regret, and dropped his hammer beside the amulet. His form dissolved into soot. The old woman stepped forward, Kryna, who had stolen herbs from a shunned widow, accusing her of witchcraft to deflect suspicion. She spat upon her own shroud and wept, then cast her shawl into the spiral. She vanished in a swirl of pine resin. Finally, the child, a girl who had broken her promise to play with a lonely friend. Tearfully, she knelt and laid a lock of golden hair at Elena's feet. The girl vanished, her laughter echoing like a wind chime. Elena's heart clenched. Each confession had borne truth, and each confession had freed another fragment of the past. The queen's gaze softened. "You have reminded them of their debts, and they have paid. But one remains." A single figure waited, Elena herself. The queen's voice dropped. "Daughter of memory, bearer of truth, what debt do you owe?" Elena's throat tightened. All the trials, the pain, the weight of her mother's memories pressed upon her. She thought of every wrenching scream, every choking sob in the hollow tunnels, of the man whose guilt had chained him, of the child begging for notice. She felt rage, compassion, and an ache for absolution. She knelt, placing her mother's silver needle beside the amulet. "I owe this," she said, voice trembling yet clear. "I owe the truth we buried in fear. I owe remembrance to every soul silenced by shame. I owe the living the courage to speak their own confessions and the grace to listen." The clearing was still. The air, once heavy with echoes, now held a hush, hope. The queen advanced, stepping lightly upon leaves that glowed like embers. She lifted Elena's chin with a finger pale as bone. Your burden was great. You have carried both sorrow and mercy. You have forgiven some and remembered all. She paused. Thus I grant you this boon. With a gesture, she transferred the amulet's glow into Elena's chest. The mark bloomed anew, no longer a sigil of debt, but a seal of remembrance. It pulsed warmly. You shall be the living tomb, keeper of stories that cannot die. When memory is threatened, call upon this seal. We will answer. But remember, truth is a living thing. It must be tended, not locked away. The queen stepped back. The bone circle cracked and fell silent. The spirits rose in a gentle swirl, lifting skyward like doves freed. One by one, they crossed the boundary of life and death, finally at rest. Only Elena remained, standing alone under the embered moon. As the first pale light painted the treetops, the villagers crept into the clearing. They found Elena, weary but unbroken, cradling the silver needle. Ion ran to her, relief flooding his features. Others knelt, silent, acknowledging the changes their hearts had made. Father Petru approached, head bowed. I have much to learn, he murmured. Krina offered Elena a bundle of herbs and a tearful apology. Even the children left gifts at the clearing's edge, hand-drawn pictures of the forest and its spirits. Elena folded them close. We are all guardians now, she told them. We remember. In the days that followed, the valley transformed. The well was blessed by all, priest, healer, and elder. The church accepted that consecration came from intent, not fear. The blacksmith forged a memorial plaque bearing the names of the forgotten. Krina opened her herb garden to everyone, teaching the old ways without accusation. Stories of Elena's journey spread to neighboring villages. Pilgrims came, not to see a monster, but to learn how to honor their own dead, to speak the names that homelessness had forgotten. And Elena? She settled into a new rhythm, tending wounds by day, gathering confessions by night, recording each in the book of remembrance, its pages bound with her mother's ribbon and sealed with you. What is a monster, if not a story untold? The Strigoi were never foreign creatures. They were the shadows of our own neglect, the echoes of promises we dared not keep. Through grief unspoken, we bind the dead to our world. Through confession, we set them free. Elena's journey reminds us that true courage is not slaying the darkness, but inviting it into the light. To remember is to love. To confess is to heal. To forgive is to transcend. Under the harvest moon, the valley learned a final truth. The dead do not rest in silence. They rest in memory. The dawn after the harvest moon was soft and gray, as though the world itself exhaled. The Carpathian peaks, edged with early frost, stood silent witness. In the valley below, the forest's edge glowed with new life. Ferns unfurled, mushrooms peeked from moss, and the well, once stagnant, sparkled with clear water. Elena awoke in her cottage, the silver needle amulet warm against her chest. On the table lay a simple cup of chamomile tea, its steam rising in graceful spirals. The scent comforted her, grounding her in the world of the living. Behind her, the flames danced in the hearth, and she felt a quiet peace, one that had been absent for so long. Yet, even in peace, reflection demands its due. Elena rose, wrapping her shawl about her shoulders, and stepped outside. The village stirred, doors creaked open, smoke rose in gentle plumes, and children's bare feet pattered along the path. Ion appeared at her side, carrying a basket of wild mushrooms and freshly baked bread. He welcomed her gaze with a soft smile. They speak of you already, he said. They've begun to share their stories. Elena nodded, her eyes misting with gratitude. Then our work continues. That morning, Elena resumed her role as the village healer, but with a transformed heart. She no longer saw her craft as merely tending physical ailments. She now understood that every wound, seen or unseen, carried a story longing to be told. Her first patient was old Ionel, the man whose anger had shackled him after his sister's untimely death. He had come for poultices for his arthritis, but it was his soul that needed soothing. Elena brewed a salve infused with lavender and valerian, applying it gently to his swollen joints. As she worked, She spoke softly about his sister's name, Serena, inviting him to share the memory he had buried. Tears filled his eyes. "I told no one," he murmured. "I was ashamed I could not save her." "You did what you could," Elena replied. "But now you can set her free, in your heart." He nodded, and with that acknowledgement, his pain eased. Not just the ache in his joints, but the weight on his spirit. By midday, word spread that children should gather at the old well. Elena had organized a vigil. Each child would whisper the name of someone they had lost into the well's waters, then toss a flower upon its surface. Under her guidance, the children formed a circle. One by one, they bent to the well's edge, cupped their hands, and spoke. A name for a grandmother lost to fever, a cousin taken by wolves, a friend who vanished in the woods. After each name, a blossom drifted upon the water's mirror. Laughter and tears mingled. The well, once a source of fear, became a sacred pool of remembrance. Elena watched Ion stand behind them, pride and sorrow mingling in his gaze. When the last child whispered, the well's surface shimmered. Together, they dipped their hands and let the cold water spill through their fingers, a promise that memory, like water, cannot be contained. In the afternoon light, Elena visited Toma, the village elder whose knowledge of old lore had guided her through the darkest trials. His herb garden lay beyond the far well, where elderflowers grew in profusion and sage perfumed the air. Toma was seated on a stone bench, tracing lines in the dirt with a carved stick. He looked up at Elena with a proud smile. "They spoke to me," he said. "When the moon was blood, they called my name among the echoes. I confessed my reluctance to teach my own son the old words. I feared it would curse him." Elena sat beside him. "And now," he pointed to a jar of dried berries, "I have prepared seeds for every child's naming ceremony. They will learn the words, so they remember, and so the Strigoi remain at rest." They shared tea as the sun dipped low, and Toma recited ancient lines of binding and release. Elena realized that knowledge handed down, spoken aloud, was the greatest protection against silence's curse. In the blacksmith's forge, Ion's father hammered iron over glowing coals. The clang of metal echoed like a heartbeat through the cool evening air. Elena approached him, watching sparks arc into the twilight. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I made something," he said, revealing a large iron plaque. Etched into its surface were the names of every Strigoi, the women, men, and children whose memory the village had restored. Ion stepped forward, tracing a finger over the names. "We'll place it by the gate," he said, "so every traveler passing through knows we remember." Elena's eyes glistened. And so the dead remain honored, not forgotten. They hung the plaque under conversation. Villagers gathered, murmuring each name aloud. The iron gleamed in the torchlight, a testament to remembrance forged in fire and compassion. As dusk fell, Father Petru sought Elena at the chapel's threshold. He carried a small censer, its smoke curling in hesitant spirals. "May I walk with you?" he asked. They strolled beneath lantern-lit archways, the silence between them warmed by candlelight. "I have rebuilt trust," he said, "but I still struggle. The church taught me fear of the unknown. You taught me faith in memory." Elena smiled gently. "Fear is the dagger of silence. Faith is the embrace of remembrance. Both are choices." He inhaled. "Teach me those choices." Together, they entered the chapel. Petru opened the doors wide, letting in the night air. Elena placed a bundle of herbs beside the altar, rosemary for remembrance, yew for release. The priest blessed them, uttering prayers that wove Christian and ancient lore. In that moment, the walls seemed to expand, echoing with the names of the Strigoi, whispering blessings across the veil. That night, Elena returned to her cottage. By lamplight, she opened the leather-bound book of remembrance that she had begun recording upon her return. Its pages bore names, stories, and confessions, inked in careful script and bound with her mother's ribbon. She read aloud. "Serena, sister lost to the well. Forgiven. Ionel, friend forgotten in fear. Released. Marta, child unspoken in shadows. Remembered." Each entry glowed softly on the page, as though the act of writing anchored the memory in the world of the living. Elena paused at a blank page near the end. There, she wrote a final line. "Elena, daughter of memory, guardian of stories, bearer of truth." She closed the book, laying her hand upon its cover. In the hush, she felt the faintest tremor, like a heartbeat in the wood. In the following days, Elena ventured once more into the woods, this time not as one seeking answers, but as one offering gratitude. She walked the paths that had challenged her, placing wildflowers at the boundary stone, whispering thanks to the watcher in the trees, and leaving offerings of grain at the tree-shaped woman's roots. The forest, she sensed, had grown gentler. Its shadows held no malice now, only memory's murmur. As she passed the doorless hut, its walls no longer groaned. Instead, a quiet warmth lingered, as if its spirits, too, rested at last. Elena knelt at the forest's edge and spoke. "Thank you for guiding me, for reminding me, for granting me this covenant. I will honor it." A breeze stirred the branches overhead, a soft, approving sigh. By the end of the week, the valley had changed in small, sacred ways. Morning bells rang not for fear, but in remembrance, silently honoring those who had passed without a proper farewell. Communal meals included a moment of silence, where each person spoke a name before breaking bread. Story circles formed by the fire, where villagers shared tales of ancestors, weaving folklore with personal history. Herb workshops taught children the old names and uses of plants, ensuring both healing and lore endured. Pilgrim paths marked with iron plaques led travelers through memory's way, guiding them to the well and the book of remembrance. Life resumed its rhythms, but now threaded with mindfulness. In every hearth's glow, in every whispered name, the valley thrived, rooted in both life and death, in both speaking and listening. Elena stood once more at the well, watching the moon's reflection shimmer on its waters. She recalled her first steps into grief's labyrinth, the temptation of comfort that nearly trapped her, the trials that tested her mercy and resolve. She thought of her mother's untold secrets, of the Strigoi queen's bargain, and of the living souls she had guided to confession. What had begun as a journey to save one restless spirit had become a rebirth for an entire community. The valley had learned that to confront the dead is to face ourselves, our failures, our fears, our capacity for both harm and healing. She lifted a cup of well water to her lips, then lowered it. "We cannot undo the past," she whispered, "but we can carry its lessons forward. We cannot bring back every life, but we can speak every name." In the silver glow, her reflection shimmered, not as the healer Elena once believed herself to be, but as the guardian of memory. If you walk through any village, past or present, and hear faint whispers in the wind, know they are not merely stories. They are echoes of lives that shaped us. And if fear tempts you to silence, remember Elena's journey. That truth must be tended, that confession frees, and that remembrance is the highest form of love. So, let us speak the names we hold in our hearts. Let us share the stories we fear to tell. Let us gather in circles of light and say, "I remember," because it is in remembering that we truly live, and in speaking truth that the dead rest at last. The forest at dawn held its breath. Light filtered through ancient pines, painting the glade in gold and emerald. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine resin and blooming herbs. Birds, once silent in fear, now greeted the day with clear song, as if honoring an unspoken pact. Elena stood at the forest's edge, the silver needle amulet resting over her heart. Her journey, which began in grief and dread, had forged a covenant between worlds, the living and the dead, memory and silence, love and acceptance. In these final moments, she reflected on the truths she had unearthed. Monsters are seldom born, they are made, of fear left to fester, of love unspoken, of debts unpaid. The Strigoi were neither fiends nor saviors, but the woven fabric of human necessity and neglect. They rose where stories died. They lingered where confessions failed. Yet beneath every spectral whisper lay an essential wisdom, that remembrance binds us better than fear ever could. To remember is to honor. To speak is to heal. And to forgive, ourselves and others, is to transcend the cage of regret. Memory is not a passive archive. It is a living entity, breathing through our stories, our rituals, our shared moments. It guides us toward empathy, reminding us that every life, no matter how brief or obscure, has weight. Yet memory, when stifled, curdles into guilt and shame. It becomes a ghost that haunts doorways and dreams. Elena's Odyssey taught the valley that memory must be tended like a garden. The Book of Remembrance, the Iron Plaques, the Well's Vigil, each was a seed planted against the advance of silence. Over time, these seeds would bloom into communal strength, weaving resilience through the hearts of all who lived there. Confession dissolves the boundaries between the confessor and the listener. When Father Petru admitted his failure to consecrate a child's grave, he shed the heavy mantle of clerical infallibility and reclaimed true faith. When the blacksmith and the old woman voiced their regrets, they reclaimed their humanity. And when Elena herself confessed her own missteps, her hesitation to read her mother's letter, her initial lash of anger at those who doubted, she demonstrated that vulnerability is not weakness but courage. Through confession, the village learned to embrace accountability. They realized that mistakes, when acknowledged, can become the bridge to compassion, not the chain that binds to shame. Resistance to change arises from the fear that something beloved will be lost. The villagers feared acknowledging the Strigoi because they believed it would unleash chaos. Instead, by facing the unknown, they found a deeper order, one that integrated the past, accepted the present, and opened possibilities for the future. Elena's refusal to take the path of vengeance demonstrated the highest form of change, choosing creation over destruction. She spoke the Strigoi's truth not to summon wrath, but to awaken understanding. In doing so, she showed that the most radical act is often the simplest, telling the truth with compassion. Death is not an end, but a threshold. Beyond it lies not emptiness, but the vast tapestry of all who came before, ancestors, friends, strangers. The Strigoi existed on that threshold, reminding the living that each step forward is guided by footsteps we cannot see. Elena became the guardian of memory, standing vigil at that threshold. With every name she recorded, every story she shared, she wove the living and the dead into a single, blessed continuum. As the sun climbed, Elena gathered her thoughts for one final invocation. She raised her voice, not in chant, but in simple, clear speech. To those who walk these woods, to those who tend these fields, to those who sit by their hearths, speak the names that matter. Speak the stories that ache in your hearts. For in remembering, we honor the dead, we heal the living, and we shape the future. Her words drifted through the forest, carried by early breeze into every home. The Strigoi vanished from sight, but their legacy endured. No longer feared as monsters, they became teachers of empathy, of honesty, of the sacred bond between past and present. Their story, once buried, now thrived in every whispered name, every shared confession, every act of remembrance. Elena knew the path ahead would not be without sorrow. Grief does not end, it transforms. But she also knew that sorrow, when shared, becomes solace. Standing at the clearing where it all began, Elena placed a single yew sprig beside the boundary stone, a token of release and renewal. She let the forest wind carry it into the undergrowth, knowing that memory lives not in stone or parchment alone, but in every heartbeat that remembers. In that moment, she felt the Strigoi Queen's presence, not as a looming shadow, but as a gentle guardian. The Queen's parting words echoed softly in her mind. Memory is the greatest gift and the heaviest burden. Wear it wisely. Elena smiled and whispered to the dawn, I will.